Welcome back to Hillman Ferry Campground, a unit of Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area and operated by the United States Forest Service with some important caveats. We've got some state natural areas inside the perimeter. The call is coming from inside the house. We've also got national battlefields, usually run by the National Park Service. History, interpretation is kind of their jam, curating that kind of stuff. But, as we know, the Forest Service is curating a ton of history here. Tomorrow, part of our exercise is to head to the Home Place 1850s Farm, which is where the Forest Service has dismantled cataloged at an archaeological preservation level, and then reassembled in complete at Home Place. It is a full-on working farm. They raise and slaughter their animals for food. They use oxen to plow, and they grow and spit their own tobacco. Pretty cool stuff. Shake their own shingles, that kind of a thing. So there's a whole bunch of traditional woodsman kind of stuff going on there. Shaking shingles, repairing 1850s era cabins, and so on and so forth. So our plan for today is to start up there at the big black squiggle of Hillman Ferry Campground. And our map is approximately oriented to how we are facing. So if east is about where the sun is and north is up, so we'll be a little bit flipped around, but we're gonna spend the first part of the morning here at Hillman Ferry Campground. And then we'll get onto the Trace, this about 75 mile long road that runs along the spine of this little peninsula, created by two lakes, created out of the two rivers. All right, so we are land between the rivers, now land between the lakes. We're gonna head from Hillman Ferry Campground after spending a couple hours here with Lincoln. We're gonna wander around. This is a pretty exceptional campground. We were talking over at the other table about how there's some national parks, some of which we'll be visiting, that have 10 or 100 times much vegetation as the typical national forest does. Now, this is a national recreation area run by the National Forest, so this one is pretty intensively visited. But even on a recreation light forest like the Shawnee, which is relatively small, it's not real close to any major urban areas, it's not real close to any super famous national parks like Crown Jewel type parks like the Grand Canyon. Anywhere from 95 to 97% of the human traffic on a national forest is typically for recreation use. So that's interfacing a lot with the wildlife, it's interfacing a lot with the forest and physical resource ecological components of it. But fundamentally, this is going to be a people and landscape intensively managed kind of a place. So in order to see that, see how that kind of plays out, we're going to check out Hillman Ferry and some peculiar and interesting, but also some very common and widespread things going on here, both in terms of management and in terms of resource impacts, social impacts, things like crowding, displacement, things like soil transport, so picking it up out of a trail tread and dumping it in catfish habitat. Well, the catfish can tolerate quite a bit of turbidity or muddiness or cloudiness in the water, but at some point we can actually blow out the habitat for their food and fill in all those little cracks and crevices that those benthic macroinvertebrates like to take on as their sort of shelter and habitat from the catfish. So trail problems can lead to fishing problems and so on and so forth. This is all interconnected. In the language of today's Zoomers, we'd say it's intersectional. We can't tease out any part of this without affecting all the rest. So we're going to spend our first part of the morning here at Hillman Ferry. We'll come back to our campsite here. We'll have a brief kind of late brunch or early lunch kind of a thing. Repack our day packs and then jump on the vehicles. If you want to, one of our next stops is going to be Hematite Lake. It's a very flat contour style hike. It's a shoreline hike, so it's iso elevation. We're not going up and down a bunch of ridges and stuff like that. So if you want to, let's load a whole bunch of water bottles into your backpacking pack. If you're thinking about going backpacking later on summer camp, Hematite Lake is a nice, easy, flat 2-mile contour hike. You can use that as a shakedown cruise to start test fitting a pack if you're borrowing one. Making sure it's length to your torso and the hip belt's all dialed in, stuff like that. That's an optional thing. I will not be doing that because my back's still jacked up. But I will be on that hike with you guys and providing a bunch of tips and stuff like that to help out with that. We'll also check out a bunch of mixed age burn compartments along the hike at Hematite Lake. Pretty cool thing. While we're in that area, either before or after Hematite Lake, we'll see how the weather's doing. We'll head over to Woodlands Nature Station. So, Nature Station is one of our wildlife focused spots. It is a place where animals that are too injured to survive in the wild are brought. They are rehomed permanently, typically at Woodland Nature Station. And in the past, they've been helping with a very, very difficult and resource-intensive effort to repopulate and repatriate some pretty badly threatened red wolves around our border with Mexico. So Arizona, New Mexico, stuff like that. When we put up fence lines for national defense and boundary delineation, that stops a lot of megafauna migration across those lines. And the Mojave, the Sonoran Deserts, difficult environments in the first place without a whole bunch of carving up or fracturing and smallening parcels of habitat. Okay, so Woodlands Nature Station is actually helping out with that effort in the same way that Land Between the Lakes is helping to work pretty hard with this huge consortium of National Park Service, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife. Ted Turner, the cable billionaire magnate, is heavily involved with this as well. But breeding up native, or as native as we can get them, elk and American bison populations, and reintroducing those all across Illinois and Kentucky here and down in Tennessee, Missouri, over at Peck Wildlife Ranch, working on some of this stuff. Elk used to be as far east as Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and they've been reintroduced there, and they're doing pretty well. But it takes a lot of work, and places like this, a national recreation area, where we can kind of farm up those populations, and then very sort of consciously and mindfully send out sort of sub-parcels of those populations to places, tracking the genetics so that we don't get too much inbreeding and we don't get too much crossbreeding with cattle in the case of the bison. So beefalo are a thing, and when we get out west, we'll talk a little bit about the politics and ecological dynamics, zoology dynamics of domesticated species that can interbreed with wild types, and how that can be very tricky and difficult, and even cause billions of dollars of economic impact when brucellosis, a slow burn but very serious disease, can transmit between wild type and domesticated cattle varieties and stuff like that. Ranchers get pretty pissed off when reintroduced bison force a kill off of their entire herd. Right, that's a pretty big deal. So we'll deal with those kind of dynamics, and we'll talk a lot about water politics and dynamics and survival out west when we get there. But here, this is kind of a zoological industrial site, right? We're breeding up elk, we're breeding up bison kind of as fast and as hard as we can in a spot like this, because again, this is a utilitarian, conservation-oriented place. The mission here isn't to preserve overwhelming and outstanding, unique natural beauty factors like a mountain range or something like that, as a Grand Teton or something like that, a national park. It is to serve the most recreationists, breed up the most bison, and so on, that we possibly can, and hopefully have a lot of good, fun, happy folks enjoy the process along the way as we go. Okay, so start at Hillman Ferry, Hematite Lake, and Woodlands Nature Station next. We will kind of skip by a couple of other interesting spots like Energy Lake, but we'll continue down the trace, down toward, we'll pass by the Elk and Bison Prairie initially, so if you see that on our left-hand side as we're driving southward, don't panic. We'll head to Golden Pond Visitor Center. There's some pretty cool, heavily maintained trails. The Central Hardwoods Scenic Trail. You may not know this, or you may know this as a forestry person at SIU, but we are in the Central Hardwoods, where east meets west, where north meets south, where we have cypress trees and boreal species like spruce and fir sometimes as well. Like it all kind of comes together right around here ecologically. So we'll take a look at both the landscape and the forest ecology here, as well as just ratchet basic trail construction and layout techniques to help keep the soil here and not put it in catfish territory. This is going to be a super important thing when we get out west and we have very, very sensitive clear water species like trout that folks love to fly fish, and they're delicious and so on and so forth, and they just can't really tolerate some of the stuff that we're doing here and we don't even really think about, like Turkey Bay OHV area, which is a pretty soil erosive kind of forest and outdoor recreation type. That's right here. That's not that far from a major national level sport fishery. Tournaments are happening on Barkley and Kentucky Lake basically constantly throughout the season, like big sponsored competitions with professional athletes and so forth. So we'll drive down from Woodlands Nature Station and so forth down to Golden Pond Visitor Center and Planetarium. Plus minus on the planetarium, it doesn't really have much to do with forestry, so it's kind of a gee whiz thing, but not really for us. And then we'll get as much done as we can down here. This will probably take us through the end of the afternoon. And then on our way back, we'll try and time the Elk and Bison Prairie to right before sunset. As I mentioned yesterday, they are a crepuscular species, or they are both more active at dawn and dusk. And Lincoln was saying last night that I guess the bison have just calved. So we might see some like itty bitty tiny babies. And the only chance we're gonna get to see those when they're not hiding from the heat in the deep woods or hiding from the rain in the deep woods and so on and so forth, and circled up in the woods at night against predators, is at sunrise and sunset. The Elk and Bison paddock does close right at sunset because we all saw Jurassic Park. We know how it ends. It's the same kind of gate in there. It's pretty cool. You can play the theme song as we drive in. Whatever. Exactly. So we'll try and time that on our way back up and out. So keep me honest on that if we're lagging a little bit at Golden Pond and on the trails and stuff. We need to pack back up. And then it's probably a good half hour, 45-minute drive back home to enjoy our evening. If it ends up being pretty hot and sunny today, remember here at Hillman Fair we do have a swimming beach at the far side of the campground if anybody wants to jump in and low-key shower off. All right, that's kind of the plan for today. The plan for tomorrow is to head back down the trace and basically pick up where we leave off today. So we'll get down. If we don't have time for Turkey Bay today, we'll hit that tomorrow if we can, weather permitting. And then we'll continue all the way down towards Home Place 1850s Farm. It's a good ways down there. And then on our way down or our way out, we'll check out Wrangler's Equestrian Campground. Horseback riding is a huge, huge thing that substantially modifies forest structure and function in southern Illinois on the Shawnee. Like, it's a big deal. Shawnee National Forest has spent millions of dollars in the past 15 years to build up some world-class equestrian trails, and Land Between the Lakes as a national recreation area has kind of the permission and also the mission or the mandate to go even harder on horseback riding than Shawnee National Forest does, because multiple use sustained yield, right? Forest Service basic operating style for the Shawnee is going to be to balance up horseback riding with all of the other things. Well, a national recreation area, there's a little bit more of a tilt towards the recreation on that balance, which makes sense, right? It's right there on the label. So, Wrangler's Camp, pretty big deal. Check out the Cowboy Chapel and some $100,000 horse trailers with like camping and RV stuff built in. We saw a horse trailer with a Whirlpool roof one year.
What?
Satellite dishes, like some people go pretty hard on this stuff, right? And so if you have somebody with a budget of like $1 million for their horses and the trailer and all their gear and so forth, they're gonna come to use that stuff as hard as they can. So you as the forester, right? We're trained in keeping some trees up and healthy and felling some trees and pulling them out and turning them into toilet paper and all sorts of timber forest products and so forth. But a lot of people are coming here to do other things, mostly not really having or wanting to think about the trees except to just enjoy them aesthetically. So we got to be ready for that. It's this kind of constant arms race we'll see between the foresters trying to maintain some tent pads and people coming in with 50-foot, multi-ton trailers with whirlpools built into the roof. Because we can, right? It's the American way, right? We can, so we will. Anyway, so that's kind of the brief version of today and tomorrow's plan. Everything is, of course, subject to weather. The report's pretty good, so we should be good to go. Along those lines, love to see some sunblock and bug dope on people so that we stay healthy and good to go. This is a good time to set the habit for sunblock before you get sunburned. When we go out west, it's going to happen a lot faster and it's going to happen a lot harder. So sun poisoning has been a thing on summer camp when I take students west. And it's just on us to wear those long sleeves, wear those wide brimmed hats. Nash, you're my guy. It's on us, right? So we know this stuff going in, and I'm happy to kind of coach and provide advice as much as I can, but I need everybody to ask questions and be thinking along the lines of, do I need SPF chapstick? Eventually, yes. That's a very good idea, and so forth, right? So start thinking through the details on stuff like that. Start thinking through whether you want to load up your pack for today's easy, short, flat backpacking test run hike at Hematite Lake if you would like to, and if not, no big deal. But either way, generally get in the habit of your day pack has rain gear, even on a beautiful blue sky day, just because it gets windy out west, and our rain gear is real good, double duty for that as well. It's also pretty good bug protection when you get pretty desperate. You don't want to slather yourself down with DNA dissolving DEET. All right? Cool.
Oh,
question.
How long is the Hematite Lake hike?
I recall it's about 2 miles.
Okay.
So not too bad. We'll do a little bit of stop starting along the way too. Just talk about interesting stuff along the way, like those burn compartments I mentioned.
I know we talked about it earlier, but Blaine brought up a good idea for like the day trip stuff like this. I think we can all fit in the big truck in the bus. And so Blaine was like, if we all piled into that would save on gas money instead of taking 2 vehicles for just day trip stuff.
Yeah.
If you guys aren't
cool.
down,
Yeah,
Gary's not here yet or anything like that.
Yeah, if you
so
guys aren't
we have-
down,
we
like
have
we don't
room.
have to. I was just gonna float that out there, but for day trips, I feel like it'd be a little more understanding to be shoulder to shoulder. But when we go, 17-hour drive, it's probably more comfortable
Yeah.
to take both.
Okay.
Gives your classmate drivers a break as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool. All right. If that's the case, we'll plan on all piling into the bus. So that means think through if you're in the van, or particularly if any of your gear's in the van, we're not going to have access to that most of the day once we head out in the one bus.
Will there be bathrooms like on the way, or should we go like now?
There are, yes. So the answer is always yes. Pee before you go, and there are bathrooms at Woodlands Nature Station, like nice flush toilets. Hematite Lake has like pit toilets.
Which one are we going to first again?
It'd probably be a little bit more comfortable to hike Hematite Lake instead of doing Woodlands Nature Station first. This is indoor and outdoor, mostly in the shade. This is shaded, but when we're hiking and walking and stuff like that, every few degrees that we can save before it gets, peak hot at about 3 p.m. So let's do that first.
Okay.
Do the hike first. And we'll get going. But yeah, so your day pack, generally always want to have your notes. Small first aid kit, just in case. Rain gear, food, water, personal communication devices, if you have those, and so on and so forth. if we're in one vehicle, we have relatively fewer ports to charge phones from. I know people are starting to get into that territory a little bit. I am too. So I've got 2 battery banks charging off of solar panels right now. We have 2 or 4 DC 12 volt jacks that we can get 1, 2 phones charging on each as we go. And we'll try and keep everybody happy and well connected. All right. But while we're hiking, for example, feel free to put your phone on airplane mode because 2/3 of this place has 0 reception. And you waste a lot of battery trying to scream out on your cellular radio to a tower that isn't there. Or just turn it off for a while. That's fine too. Okay. Cool
Okay.
beans. All right.